Hi and good evening, everybody. Welcome to another week here at Education Matters with Jim O'Connell. We've a little late start today, so this is a first for us, I think, in the 2 years we've been doing this, and due to technical difficulties, which included a huge issue today with thunderstorms and lightning storms a little south of the city, which played havoc with traffic congestion, etc. So, anyway, here we are, and we're heading into July 4th weekend, and so there's the first thing I would like to say is there are a lot of things have happened in the city in the last week or two, and of course we had the budget passed, and then we had an incident at West High School, which I'd like to get into in a second. But the first thing I would like to do is. A gentleman who was important to education in the city of Manchester passed away unexpectedly, as I hear, in the last few days, and that was the father of Alderman at Large, School Board Member at Large, Rich Gerard. His dad passed away, and I wanted to wish my condolences to him and to his family on the passing of his father. I didn't have the honour of knowing Mr. Gerard, but I knew of him, and I know that he devoted his life to education in the city of Manchester, and all the things that I've ever heard about Mr. Gerard Senior have always been very positive. Not alone was he a principal at Southside Middle School, but also he was there as that school opened, I believe. But he was also the president of the MEA, the Teachers Union in the city of Manchester, and so he devoted a lifetime of work to the young people and to their education here in Manchester, and deserves our respect and gratitude for that. So, once again, another point I would like to make is that there was a school board meeting last night, which I'll get into in a second. But at that school board meeting, a number of people spoke, and as did I. And it was remiss of me not to recognise Mr. Gerard. It was my intention to do it as I went up to speak, but human beings being what we are, we sometimes don't get everything perfectly right. So I was worried afterwards last night that the fact that I hadn't mentioned it at all, and other speakers had, that people might misconstrue that as in any way. So again, I do wish my sincerest condolences to Rich Gerard and to his family on the passing of his dad. I think it's important we remember those who went before us and helped us to get our school system to where it is today. Certainly those who did it from a positive point of view, as he did. So, having noted that loss, I spoke last night at the school board meeting, and my intention going in there was it was a budget. It was an opportunity for the public to comment on the school budget, and I don't know why that is, but there were two people who spoke. Myself and another person on the part of the meeting, the first meeting, which was around the school budget piece, and any of you who've been paying attention will know that, first of all, I have to say I'm disappointed only two people spoke, but I guess that's just the way it is, and we'll again, I don't have much to say about that, other than if people are concerned, then they need to demonstrate it, and if they're not concerned, well, then fair enough. But I can tell you why I think you ought to be concerned. The school budget that was passed was $167 million, which was $2 million above what Mayor Gatsis had proposed. He had proposed $165 million funding for the school, which would have been less than level funding in real terms and in actual dollars, and below the tax cap, what would have been allowed by the tax cap, which was a measly 1.2 or 3% anyway. The actual number needed to retain the profile of the district as it was this past year, that number would have been $170 million. So the 165 was going to leave us 5 million short, and as a result of that, programs and teachers would have to be eliminated. Now, by adding the $2 million onto the Mayor's proposed 165, I think many people would see that as a win for schools in the city, and I guess tightly considering only in terms of what the mayor was willing to offer the schools, getting $2 million extra dollars, I guess you could call it a win. But frankly, I'm not going to call it a win. I think it's important, and I think I'm grateful to Dr. Vargas, our superintendent, for laying out why he needed the $2 million, and also in specifying exactly what he would do with that $2 million. And so Dr. Vargas said if he got the $2 million, that extra $2 million would be spent in the following way. He said that he would reintroduce foreign languages, in this case Spanish, to the 4 middle schools. That is something that everybody has agreed for the last 4 or 5 years, that our education system was unsound without that being included. And so I think we should all be grateful that Alderman Pat Long, through his efforts and with the support of 10 members of the board, mayor and alderman, we got the additional $2 million. And so it is wonderful that we will have Spanish language in our middle schools for our middle school students starting in September. We will also, because of that additional $2 million, we will also have an SRO, or a school resource officer, a member of the Manchester Police Department, in each of our 4 middle schools. The proposal under Mayor Gatsis would have eliminated those down to half-time in our middle schools, which in light of other things we heard afterwards is extraordinary. But I think we should be grateful that they are back. Also, another part of that $2 million will be the hiring of 4 reading, whether it's actually hiring people or not, it's not always clear. Sometimes people within the district are there and able to do it, but so not to get caught up in the pedantics. But the fact is there will be 4, each one of the middle schools will have a reading specialist added to the schools, which is replacing another thing that was cut back 4 or 5 years ago during that terrible year when we lost 164 teachers. So we're getting back. The 4 middle schools will get back the 4 Spanish language teachers, so that's 4 positions there. We'll get back the reading specialist, 1 for each of the 4 middle schools again, that's 4 positions there. The two SROs, or school resource officers, will be added back in to make sure that we have 1 school resource officer in each of the 4 middle schools. And then the remaining monies out of the $2 million will, it depends on the number right now, but it's a moving thing, but we will get 7 or so teachers to put into the elementary school who will help to alleviate those classes of 30 in our elementary schools, and so that is a win, I guess, if you tightly consider it in terms of what Mayor Gatsis was offering us. And I'm not in the business of, I don't know how else to describe it other than what Mayor Gatsis is offering us, because in the end he's the one, even though it's not about him, but he is the one who has the purse strings and who comes up with these budgets that are illegitimate because they're not properly balanced, etc. anyway, and they're simply an exercise in meeting a tax cap and continuing to underfund education. So that's what our additional $2 million will do. However, and that's all very commendable, and I think it's important that the school district go forward and do these things that it said it was going to do under the $2 million. And as I said to Dr. Vargas after the meeting last night, I think he'll be in a much stronger position going into next year's discussions around budget, because I anticipate he will do what he said he was going to do, and so he'll be able to, and the school, and by extension the school board, will be able to say to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, you gave us $2 million extra. This is what we did. We said we would do this, and this is what we did. As a result of that additional money, we have added the following programs in our schools. That is progress, and we're moving forward. I think that's an argument that was set up to be made and should be made and now can be made. However, the point I made to the board of mayor, or to the school board members last night, was what is lost in that scenario is that we still had a net loss of teachers in our school district going into next year. So the reason, the fact that we didn't get the 170 we needed for level funding meant that we were having 14 people rift or reduction in force. Now, it seems as though already some of those may be hard back. I heard that the number might go down to as low as 9 or 10 instead of 14, which is very good news. But again, we're turning good news. We're saying good news about a negative almost. We're not losing as much as we thought we would. The 28 retirements that are not going to be replaced, we still get to that 40-ish number, and so there will be 40 less teachers between RIFs and reduction in force or being fired, between people being fired and people and not replacing people who are retiring. The number is around 40. We'll see where it comes out when all the whittling down and etc. is done. But it seems about 40. And then it seems, I'm sorry that we have to be imprecise, it seems that we will end up with a hiring or reallocation of something around the approaching 30 mark. So as best as I can ascertain today, we will have a net reduction in teachers in Manchester of 12 year over year. Now, if you've been paying attention and watching this show, you know that I made an attempt, and I spoke about it here, in the weeks running up to this budget process, to speak to both the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and to the school district, and to just read them their own figures. And it was disturbing to me, and frankly annoying to me, that as part of an exercise which was simply reading to the school board and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, here's the list of classes at each of our elementary schools that has greater than 30 in it. And I used the model that we had about this 3 classes of 30 being 90 kids, and that if we added a teacher, we'd have 4 classes of 22. It's a very easy construct. It's not complicated math. Even the thickest amongst us should be able to understand that basic logic. If you have 90 kids, 3 classes of 30, and you add 1 teacher, you'd have 4 classes of 22, or actually 2 of 23 and 2 of 22. That seemed like a no-brainer to me, and so it's frustrating to me. I don't know where to go with this, ladies and gentlemen, because when I listen to an alderman and a school board member both repeat what are falsehoods. They may claim they don't know they're falsehoods, but they are people of influence, and they are people who others listen to. And so to hear an alderman say that, we hear Jim O'Connell, but he cherry-picked the numbers, and then to hear a school board member say the same thing. And this is not, I'm not naming them because it's not about personalities, but it's just frustrating because they're actually wrong. It's not, they're just misinforming the public. And so it's easier to make decisions to reduce teachers in a school district that desperately needs them if you're not willing to even agree to what the set of facts are. My worry going into next year is that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, who ultimately control the budget in the City of Manchester, are going to say to the school district, hey, we gave you everything we could give you last year. Don't you remember back in 2017, we gave you an additional $2 million over and above what the mayor was going to give you so you could put those programs in place. And what do you mean you're coming back here again in 2018 and looking for additional funding? Is there no end to we keep having to throw money at you? And I hear this nonsense again and again and again and again on social media, in conversations, in the public domain and at public meetings. You hear this thing about, we have to keep on pouring money in there. Long-windedly right now, I'm trying to point out that what we just did with the addition of the 2 million was nothing related to, not even a stepchild of, the idea that we poured money into the system. What we did do this year, and make no mistake about it, and what people should be very aware of, is that we have the highest number of children per teacher of any district in the whole state of New Hampshire right now. That's got nothing to do with declining populations, contributing towns leaving, or putting all that to one side. Just take all the pluses and minuses in any direction you want, and you get back down to one simple, clear, undeniable fact. In 2017, the city of Manchester has more children per teacher than any other town or city in the state of New Hampshire. That's a fact. And that's a shameful place for us to be. And in light of that, even with that being an undeniable fact that no one will argue about, you won't hear people telling you that's not so. Even despite of that, what we did as a city in the last 2 weeks was we decided to eliminate a net 12 teachers out of our 22 schools. That's a half teacher a school is what we have removed. So my point here, ladies and gentlemen, is only to speak some truth here and to give you some facts about what's actually going on, rather than people's agendas and what they, how they like to word things. It's very simple. We have the most crowded classrooms in the state of New Hampshire, and what we did was we eliminated 12 teachers in the sight of that. Now, what's inexcusable in the middle of all of this, of course, is that it's all set up in the first case by Mayor Gatsas coming forward with this ridiculous $165 million budget, which means that when it's overridden and $2 million is added into the school district, it appears as though the school district is getting all kinds of additional funding, etc., etc. The bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, is despite the fact that we have the least well-funded school system in the state of New Hampshire, and we've got the most crowded classrooms in the state of New Hampshire, despite that, we actually eliminated teachers this year. So we have less teachers next year than we have this year. That's what we did. And we did that while the additional monies that was found over Ted Gatsas's budget was found from additional revenue in the city, because we're in this ludicrous position that when we have if we had a multi-story high-rise built in Manchester this year, and it was 1,000 floors high, and we had tens of millions of dollars coming in extra taxes, the city of Manchester couldn't spend that on its schools, on its police, or on its fire department. It couldn't spend it on anything because the tax cap would say, no, you can't spend additional revenue. So all that happened this year was that some of the additional revenue has been allowed to be spent on schools. As taxpayers, you're actually probably going to see an actual tax cut this year. It is just the way in which we manage this city is just ridiculous. And I have to tell you, it is clear to me that we need new leadership in this city. Mayor Gatsas has overseen this nonsense for 8 years, and he wants to go back for 2 years more. He has taken the city, in terms of its education at very least, into territory and places that we never thought that it would go to. We never thought we'd be scraping the bottom of the barrel in education in the state of New Hampshire, and that's where he's taken it. And frankly, he's taken it there in a callous way, in an unthinking way, in a way that makes no sense whatsoever. It's just political expediency. I won't raise your taxes, so he can blame whoever it is who might be coming along that they're going to somehow be big spenders compared to him. It's not about that, as I've tried to explain again and again and again, sweating the asset or having an asset and not looking after it is not good stewardship. If you get a beautiful car and you refuse to have the oil done every 3,000 miles, or let's say you say, well, look, I'll only get it done every 5,000 miles, but when you refuse to redo the oil, driving around in the fancy car is not saying how you can run it cheaper than everybody else is just ludicrous, ladies and gentlemen. It's stupidity. It's a nonsense. And that's effectively what Mayor Gatsis has been doing in Manchester, driving around, metaphorically speaking, telling us, all the shiny objects that he would like you to point at, while then at the same time defunding and underfunding department after department after department and program after program, and bringing the school district to its knees. And that should stop. And tonight I would like to be very clear that a good friend of mine, there are a number of candidates running, but a good friend of mine who I think is the best person to bring some sense of normalcy and to even introduce some excitement about moving forward into the city of Manchester is my good friend Joyce Craig, and I hope that people who listen to this show and people who are particularly those who are interested in education and in the future of our city would consider voting for Joyce, and because clearly what we've been doing is madness. Now, while we're on the topic, let me. The other thing that happened this week is we had an announcement that a 14-year-old girl was sexually assaulted and raped at West High School in September of 2015. And the first thing I guess all of us should say, and I certainly, my first thought would be with the young girl involved and with her family, and hopefully, and we've been reassured by the school district that she's had every support that she should need. And also anecdotally, it's been said that this young lady did a wonderful job in advocating for herself and in ensuring that the 17-year-old who was 17 at the time of this crime, that he was brought to justice. And so I think the first point is, that's the first point. Our thoughts should be with her and with other young people who find themselves the victims of sexual assault or any other sort of abuse. It's very important that they be allowed to, and to be allowed to come forward and to be encouraged to come forward. We know that 28% of sexual assaults on or around school properties are actually reported. Enough of that. I think there are a lot of questions around this thing at West High School. The first thing is, and the question that bothers me the most is the fact that this assault occurred in an area, a corridor at West High School, which seemingly was used by students who cut class. And so hung out there and smoked tobacco and marijuana in this corridor, and this was a known space in the school that was known to administration and others. At least that's the allegation, that's the claim. And if that was so, then I am appalled by that. And I listened to school board member at large last night, Rich Gerard. He and I don't always agree. Actually, more often than not, we don't agree, because I think we approach things very differently when it comes to our ideas about the future of education in the city, the state, and beyond. But in this case, I commend him for asking that there be an inquiry held, an examination of what went on, and that people be held to account. And too often in the city of Manchester, things are brushed under the carpet for political expediency. And in this case, this particular situation reeks, because it turns out, ladies and gentlemen, that in the 2 years since the since the incident occurred. Nobody was told about this, except, and the first thing that Mayor Gatsis had to say about it was that he wasn't aware of it. He had to backtrack on that comment when Chief Willard from the police department said that he spoke to the mayor on 2 occasions about it. And Mayor Gatsis then fell back into his position that, well, he was told about it, but he didn't realize how serious a situation it was. And if you cast your mind back, ladies and gentlemen, to the timing on this, the timing on this is very important, because this incident occurred in September of 2015. And I don't maybe need to remind you of what was going on in September of 2015. But let me. In September of 2015, this city was in the throes of what was a very exciting and a very close call mayoral election. And so the mayor was going toe-to-toe with Joyce Craig. He ended up winning by 64 votes, only after, of course, making up stories about what her stance was on various things, and in a pretty nasty way, using a letter that she had sent to the board. And in the letter, it talked about what the conversations she'd had with various constituents and what their different proposals were, and for the future of the city. And in that letter, Joyce Craig had made very plain that these were not her views, but she wanted to forward to people, let them know this is what the constituents, the comments of constituents were. And Ted Katsas, in a very and his campaign, in a very dishonest, let's just call it what it was. I mean, he knows it was dishonest. Everybody else knows it was dishonest. His campaign people can snigger up their sleeves and think it was funny. And, well, that's politics. You know what I mean? That's how it goes. Well, politics is a rough sport. Yeah, I know it's a rough sport. And I'm fine with that. But then just don't pretend you were lying when you were lying. Say, I was lying, and it's what we do in politics. Fine, so now you're a politician. You can't have it both ways. So lies were told about, and misrepresentations about Joyce's position. And that was a tough election, and it came down to 64 votes. While this was going on, it turns out that Mayor Gatsis was informed by the police chief that there was about the incident at West High School. The assistant superintendent of schools, Dave Ryan, in the face of Ted Gatsis's denials of knowing anything, and then moving his position from that to, well, I was only told that there was a sexual assault, but I had no idea whether, he went into some great detail about whether somebody was touched or not, and not that was, he got himself all wound up. And I'm looking at a piece from the union leader that relays his conversation, but he got himself wrapped around the axle about what physical assaults and etc. The bottom line is, he was in a position of denial, saying he didn't know about it, and now Chief Willard has said he did know about it, and we've still got a long way to go. But Assistant Superintendent Dave Ryan, who was the person at the district who handled it, has said publicly that he sent an email to the mayor on this topic, but that before he did that, he had a phone conversation with him. And in the phone conversation, he informed the mayor that a 14-year-old girl had been raped, and he used the word rape at West High School. And so either, at this point so far, either Chief Willard, the email, and Assistant Superintendent Dave Ryan are telling lies, or Mayor Gatsis, after his 8 years in charge of our schools, who wants to go back in and manage them for us for another 2 years, is lying. Because somebody's lying here, and I'd love to know who it was. I think that the case against that. I think that Mayor Gatsis has a case to answer. I think he's being caught here in a tough spot, and he needs to answer it. I think his predisposition to go to sort of bluster and bullying, or else total silence like last night, is not the answer here. I think the people deserve an answer from him as to how we got to this impasse, or this point. Now, on an even more, as I said at last night's meeting, I understand that an incident, whatever it is, including a horrendous crime like the one that happened at West High School, that it is important that as a community, as a society, that we not pile on, that incidents can happen anywhere, that in the nicest of neighbourhoods, in the best of schools. We only have to look at some of the most prestigious private academies in the state of New Hampshire who are currently embroiled in controversy around sexual abuse of students, etc. And that's going on today in the ivory towers of New Hampshire education. So it's important that we not extrapolate anything out from this isolated incident that should not be, because these incidents can happen anywhere to anybody at any time. And so I do not take it that because an incident happened at West High School, that's a comment on West High School. If an incident were to happen at any other school in the state, I think the same would be true. So what's troubling to me, separately from that, is the fact that there was an area at West High School which was, as I called it last night, a no-go zone, or a zone that was where people were allowed to congregate and perform illegal acts, and that was done perhaps with the knowledge of the administration, or if not with the knowledge of the administration, then with the unexcusable ignoring or ignorance of the administration. So I think there should be an accounting taken. I think our previous superintendent should be asked to answer a set of questions on this topic, as should the previous administration there. It's important to note that the superintendent in charge in 2015 is no longer with us. The principal of West High School, who was there at the time, is no longer with us. I'd also like to note that the current principal at West High School, Mr. Dishard, is a gentleman who I have great admiration for, and a very high level of confidence in his ability to run a tight ship and to run a very good school. I think West High School did remarkably well in getting Mr. Dishard as their principal last year, and it was a big loss to Central High School, but he and then Miss Laura Lord, who's the assistant principal there, they're good people running West High School today. But what was going on 2 years ago? Why was that being allowed to happen, and why was it happening? I think those questions need to be answered, and I don't believe we should allow this to be brushed under the table. If the mayor thinks he can battle this out by remaining silent on it and move on, that's not the case. Now, on another topic, we've had occasion in the past with Mayor Gatsas on topics around the way in which he has talked about immigrants and refugees, and in particular the incident at Hillside Middle School a couple of years ago, where he shouted down a gentleman and called him told him he was a refugee, not an immigrant, and pointed out the difference between the two, and which I thought was a pretty nasty way to treat a citizen of the city. But we have added to this now. We have an account of the call that Assistant Superintendent made to the mayor on the day or the day after the rape occurred at West High School, and to inform the mayor that a rape had taken place. And let me quote exactly what is on here from the reading from the union leader. Said, meanwhile, David Ryan, the outgoing assistant school superintendent, said on Monday that Gatsas' first reaction to the news was to ask, guess what he asked? How's the young lady doing? Is there any other incidents of this? What have we done to make sure that this will never happen again? No. According to Assistant Superintendent Dave Ryan's account of the conversation, Mayor Gatsas' first reaction to the news of the girl being raped was to ask the race of the perpetrator. That was what his question was. On Monday, Ryan recounted his 2015 conversation with Gatsas about the matter. This is quoting from Dave Ryan. His first question was, what colour was the boy? Ryan said. what color was the boy? I was stunned. I don't believe I responded, or responded with, I'm not sure. Ryan said he spoke to Gatsis shortly after the West High School principal informed him about the rape allegations. So, in fairness to Mayor Gatsis, it says here also that Gatsis disputed Ryan's retelling of the conversation. The mayor said he asked Ryan if there was a racial component to the attack, such as different races between the victim and the perpetrator. That's a good save. I merely asked a question, Gatsis said. There's a young lady here that's going through a very traumatic situation. What about her? This is politically driven and it's wrong, said Gatsis, who is running for re-election. I read this, ladies and gentlemen. I don't, it's very clear. Ryan says that he used the word rape when he spoke to Gatsis about the attack. But Ted Gatsis was in the middle of a mayoral election in Manchester, and he wasn't going to have the boat rocked with allegations going on, and so this issue was hidden for 2 years. I think the fact that, according to Assistant Superintendent Dave Ryan, that his first response to such an issue was to ask what colour was the boy is a it's an appalling note, and it wouldn't be believable perhaps, except that I'll give you another example which is on tape and you can see it. At Hillside Middle School, during the first mayoral debate 2 years ago, when Joyce Craig was running against Mayor Gatsis, at the very first debate, a couple of things happened that had to do with this, but one of them was the mayor was asked about the school district and the and its how it was, and compare it to when he was a kid, and he was asked about the future of the city, and so it was a general question about where we're going, etc. And I'd have to look at the transcript to see the exact quote of the note of the question that he was asked. But his first response was, well, when I went to Central High School, there were only 2 people of colour at the school back then. And I was sitting in the room at Hillside Middle School, and there were a bunch of kids there from the Bring It program who are kids who have arrived in Manchester as immigrants or refugees, who were sitting to listen to this, to learn about civics in the United States and how elections are conducted and how debates are conducted. And they are all sitting there. And the mayor's asked about the future of the city and what challenges it faces, etc. And his first answer was, well, when I went to Central High School, there were only 2 coloured kids there. I was appalled by that. I brought it up at the time. I said it to him at the next meeting, at the next debate. And so I don't understand what this obsession with colour and race is. But I have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I'm loath to go. I'm not an attack dog, and I don't want to ever be that. But I'm also not somebody who's going to sit by quietly and allow things to go unsaid just because they're uncomfortable to be said. So I'm saying them on this show here tonight in front of you and to you. When Dave Ryan says that our mayor, when told that there was a rape, that a young girl of 14 was raped at one of our high schools, that his first response was, what colour was the boy? I have a huge problem with that, ladies and gentlemen. Because if I take that and I take the fact that we live here in the city of Manchester, and our schools are underfunded, and our schools, the poorest of our kids, are the ones that are affected the most. We look at the history in Manchester of the schools with the highest level of diversity in them, having the largest class sizes, and the other things that we've seen go on. There is a problem here, and pretending that it doesn't exist is not good enough. These are uncomfortable subjects, and people don't like to go there. But the set of facts are the set of facts. In the state of New Hampshire, we know the way that school funding is managed, and school funding is managed in such a way that the kids from the poorest neighbourhoods are the kids who get the least amount of money spent on them and the least resources. And now when you scratch the surface and you find the attitude of some of our politicians, you find out you find out that you find out reasons why there isn't concern there. So I'm appalled that this is going on in our city. I'm amazed at the fact that Mayor Gatsis has handled this in the way that he has. I think he owes the city of Manchester an explanation. He has some time to sit with his advisors in a circle and come up with some convoluted set of explanations, or an adequate explanation if he can find one. But if he cannot find one, I think he has made himself and declared himself and shown himself to be unfit to be the leader of the city and to be the mayor of Manchester going forward. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your attention this afternoon. I'm sorry that we had a slow start or a late start. I look forward to seeing you next week, and hopefully we'll have more answers by then. Thank you and good night.